or most times fall from our cuts from or equipment fall under mechanical agents. And you have social agents. The social agent is another aspect of health that, or rather, this agent that most of us do not pay attention to, but it really matters. Okay, in our place of work, that interaction is social. So if the head of department does not like you and is making your life unbearable, the individual is not going to be physically sick. The person is going to be emotionally sick. So that's where the mental and social aspect comes in. Okay, so if the place of work is not giving you peace of mind, and you get to be sick, can be depressed, you'll be working but lose, can be lost in thought, and then put your hand where you're not supposed to, and then the machine grinds it, and then the mechanical occurs. It's like a vicious cycle of a chain reaction, I can call it. Okay, so and then of course there is need for environment to enable these agents to work on the host. So, and then you need physical environment. So that's where we now have, like our physical environment. So welders, workers who are hawking in the sun. So those ones are actually exposed to the agent because they are in that environment. Now, for the biological environment, let's assume someone is working in the lab. You're exposed to all these biological agents and all this stuff, because that's what you do. That's where you stay most times. So you're actually exposed to that. Okay. And then the social environment. The social environment is even your workplace is social environment. So if the social environment is conducive for your existence, then you are fine. If the social environment is not conducive for your existence, then we have the social agents, having so much effect on the post. I hope we understand this explanation, please.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so let's talk about agents. So we've talked about a biological, physical, social, mechanical, and so on. Okay, so but the agents in infectious disease, that other diagram is just telling you about diseases generally. That's called epidemiological triad. So, but in terms of communicable disease, it has to be a living agent. The sun is not a living agent. So that means the disease is going to cause can never be infectious. So the cancer of the skin cannot be infectious. Then depression due to workplace stress can never be infectious, even though it's from the social agent. So I think we understand now. So the agent that causes infectious disease or communicable disease must be alive, must be living. And so that's why we have viruses, bacteria, rickettsial, protozoa, fungi, hermit, and so on and so forth. It must have a reservoir, a source, or a vector. Okay, a reservoir. Okay, let me just define it so that when we get there, maybe we'll just keep over it. So a reservoir is, it can be living or non-living. You understand that harbors the agent, either bacteria, virus, or anything, but it carries it, but does not probably, it's just those things are just living inside that thing. It can be a man, it can be an animal, it can be non-living, but they are alive on it. You understand? So those things, once there's going to be transmission, it's going to be from that reservoir. That means that one is having it and is breeding it and it's just there. Okay. And of course, can be the source of infection. So the source is where everybody is getting it from. Just constantly, it's just there and everybody is just getting it. And when they say vector, that means the agent is inside another, can I say animal, or I cannot say animate or inanimate object, and is using it as a vehicle. So when you talk of vector, then talk of like something like a vehicle. So if it is living, that's what we call vector. But if it's not living, then it's called a vehicle. So but let me just use it interchangeably as a vehicle. So once the agent that wants to cause disease is living inside, or is carried by another maybe animal or inanimate object, call it a vector. So it must be able to multiply And I think that's the key. So when you talk of reservoir, reservoir can be man. So let me just use that. So the man or the woman just keep, the virus of the bacteria, and they just keep multiplying. So anytime the person spreads it, you usually have constant, presence of that agent in that person. And must be able to emerge from its reservoir or host. So which is the key. If it cannot move from the host, from its reservoir to the susceptible host, then disease cannot occur. So I don't think I have any example for now, because for a disease to be communicable, it must be able to emerge. It must be able, that means that disease must find a way of coming out of where it's being reserved to go and infect the new host. So I don't think I even have anyone now, my fingertip, to explain this, because if it's infectious, then it must have, this particular criteria or characteristics, and must be able to reach the new susceptible host. True, there must be a link between the host and the agent, which is what it's trying to say, and it must be able to infect new host. If it's not able to infect new host, that means it's going to die in the old host. So that means it cannot be communicable. So that's what this is. So I think these are just self-explanatory. So and these are factors in the agent that determines disease outcomes. Whether infection takes place or not may depend on a whole range of determinants. So when I was defining epidemiology, I talked about determinants and deterrents. Determinants are factors that lead to a disease, while deterrents are factors that protect, that helps individual not to fall ill. But you can actually use it also for the opposite side, determinants of maybe good behavior or deterrents of good behavior, something like that. If I hope I'm not confusing you with that, but epidemiology is actually a very huge concept, and this actually falls under it. So there are a whole lot of determinants which affects host and the agent. And giving an example now, effectivity of the agent, that's the ability to establish itself in a host. So once the agent, let's use any bacteria, let's say a bacteria enters a human host that is susceptible, it must be able to establish itself in the sense that it must be able to multiply and start producing. Because, okay, let's use this bacteria, typhoid, as an example, Salmonella typhi. Salmonella typhi has a threshold. If it does not reach that threshold, the disease will not even occur. So that's why there is incubation period. They will just keep on multiplying. Let's assume the threshold is now 100,000 copies. Now, if it has 20,000, even if you check the value, you see it will not cause disease. The person will just have it because it's still cooking up. So once it's established itself and reaching the threshold, the disease is going to occur. And then the virulence of the agent now, that's another factor that determines that disease is going to occur if someone is infected, is the virulence. That is the ability of that disease, that agent to actually kill. However, if you want to arrange this, effectivity, pathogenicity, and virulence, that's how you're supposed to arrange it. Somebody will be infected. That means you introduce infection, that is bacteria or agent to the host, and then they are able to cause disease. That's the next process. So in case you are going through an exam and they draw a timeline for all these, virulence cannot be before pathogenicity in terms of timeline. The person will get infected first, then the disease will now occur, and then the disease will now decide either to kill the person or not to kill the person. But the virulence of the agent is the ability of that agent to kill when disease occurs. Okay, so pathogenicity is the ability of that agent to cause disease. If the person is infected and it's not causing disease, so how would death occur? So that's why pathogenicity is key to either disease go to virulence. So, and we can say that there are some diseases that is going to affect man, but will not cause anything, or maybe affect animals, will not cause anything. That means not virulent in man. Or affected, it just kills them. Number one, is Ebola. Ebola does not kill those animals, but once it reaches man, it's highly virulent. So that is how this can be explained in a simpler way. Most of the bats and all the rodents that are carrying these viruses are living their normal life. It's only humans that used to go to the forest. Yellow fever affects monkeys in the bush. But they just carry the virus all around and they are fine. So that means not virulent in animals. That's yellow fever, but in can actually do, including most of the viral hemorrhagic fever. That's what they do in their primary host, which maybe by the other living animals. They might not be causing disease, but in man, they can actually kill. So I think we should be able to place this properly. So now, so we have now talked about agents. That is the first part of the chain. If you can still remember that picture we saw, okay? So this next one is route of transmission now. So now, modes of transmission of infection, it can be direct and can be indirect. If it's direct, then you can have direct contact. That's with touch. So if for instance, my hand is infected and, yes, infected and I've soiled my hand with maybe someone's vomitors or feces or blood, and then, put my hands on something else, and those germs or those agents now fall on that. That is the direct contact. It can be droplet infections, especially through sneezing. Okay, so COVID-19, other respiratory transmission can actually be gotten through this, including TB, through droplet infections. Okay, and can be through contact with soil. No hookworm. It's basically like this. People who go to farm without wearing shoes, especially in farms that are using human excreta as manure, okay, that are being infested with hookworm, eggs, and so on. So they will just penetrate human skin and they just go away. So contact with soil, that's direct transmission. And then inoculation into the skin or mucosa. Let's talk about labs. Maybe you are doing procedures and then you have a needle prick. That's inoculation into the skin or mucosa. And then the transplacenta, which is vertical, mostly for the HIV, and that's commonly seen mother-to-child transmission of HIV. Okay, but we know truly that is not only the disease that's transferred, transplacental, even the touch infections, of course, is direct, but the one that is most spoken of is that of HIV. We have other vertical transmissions. So for the indirect, that means it is not, dropped directly to the host now. So now we have vector-borne. And I've told you before what vector is. It carries the agent to meet the host. So they are vehicles. So let's talk about vehicles. Vehicles are non-living, I told you before. So if the mode of transmission is a non-living thing, we talk of vehicle. If it is a living thing, then we talk of vector-borne. So when you talk of fomites, they can form of what's called under vehicle, like let me see, like even water. Yes, you can even use water as a vehicle. So waterborne diseases are actually vehicle-borne diseases. So for vector-borne, that means it's being carried on one arthropod or the other. It might be arthropod, might be what's it called, vertebrate animal. So if it's being carried, if the agent is being carried on the body of that vector, maybe cockroach, housefly, or flea, it's being carried on their body and it's not inside their body and it's not changing, it's not doing anything, it's just being carried only, then that is mechanical. But if it has to go inside the vector, okay, okay, let me see if I can recall some. Okay, I don't think I can recall, but if you read further, you discover that some agents like the lymphatic filariasis, the Brugia malayi, and the likes, some of them will just grow inside the inside the arthropod, which is actually a Masonine species or Culex. That's for the filariasis. Now they will just grow inside them. They won't multiply. So if it's just growing and they are not multiplying, I think that is the cyclo propagative. But if they are multiplying, like from 4 to 10 to 10, that is propagative. But if they are doing, if they are doing that, if they are multiplying and then they are still growing, then that's cyclodevelopmental. This particular concept is can I say, in arthropod-borne diseases, these concepts are really, really key, because you can have an idea of what to do to those vectors, at that point in time. Of course, indirect transmission too can be airborne, and then of course fomite-borne, and then on clean hands. But there's a better way to remember these. I think I used to code it as 5 Fs: the fluid, fingers, flies, fomite, and I think is it food or so. So making it 5, the 5 Fs of disease transmission. So route of transmission, this is the manner in which the agent reaches the susceptible host. It may be by direct contact, that's skin to skin or mucosa to mucosa, as seen in HIV, or inhalation of airborne infections by coughing, and inoculation to skin, into skin or mucosa, maybe by dog bites, giving rabies, or transplacental, vertical. So I told you earlier, it's not only HIV, it touch infections, toxoplasmosis, the rubella, the cytomegalovirus, I've forgotten. So I think it's touch infections. They actually vertical transmission, but the most that is most commonly talked about is HIV. But thank God that she's even using rubella here. So some infections can have more than one route of transmission, like bubonic plague and the pneumonic plague, which is person to person. So once the flea bites, you can have bubonic plague. Once it is through air, that's person to person, maybe through cough and everything, then you have pneumonic plague. Okay, this is just a picture depicting how the dynamics of sneezing or cough. You can see the droplets, And the funny thing about these droplets is that some of them, the tiniest ones, they just stay in the air for a longer time, while the heavier ones will settle down and can fall on the floor. So if the sneeze is really, huge and powerful, can actually make this to get suspended in the air for a long time, and of course increases the chances that even when the person has gone, you can still inhale that and start having the infection. Okay, so we have indirect transmission, and as we said earlier, okay, she's even used the 5 Fs. So the 5 Fs are very, very good for us to know. Okay, so the agents most capable of surviving outside the host. That is the thing. And I hope we know why. If it cannot survive outside the host, please, how will another host get infected? So they must find a way of sustaining their living. Okay, so that's why some of them we have eggs. Some of them we have other means of maybe making the eggs to live longer, like somehow. So now, so like I said, we have flies, we have fingers, we have fomites, we have food, and we have fluid. So I think we can read over this one. It's actually easy to know. Okay, these are pictures depicting sources. So this food now, if it's not properly, I think we should even know this. I don't know how many of us have seen this video of one fruit seller, I think it's in Lagos, who was using drainage water to wash fruits that people are going to eat. So there are so many ways one can actually catch these infections. And I think this picture is just speaking that. So now coming to the hosts. So what makes a host susceptible? First of all, is the natural body defense. And we know what these are, okay? And these are, the defense that comes naturally when. So, and there are non-specific defenses like the skin, the cilia, the hairs in our nostrils, and so on. And then we have the artificial one, which is the immunization that we're talking about. So at birth, we start giving these vaccines to individuals so that they can, withstand the diseases. Okay. Sorry, excuse me. Kingsley, calm down now. Sorry. So once these immunizations are being given at birth, at 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 14, and so on, this protects them based on their age, and then of course when they are grown. So other factors affecting host immunity include age. I've told us about these extremes of age. The under 5s, they are susceptible. The age ones too, that's like that. The gender, that's the sex. For males, they have diseases that are specific to them. For females, they have diseases that are prone to, because, like I said earlier, short urethra is a disadvantage for the female gender. And then, of course, pregnancy too is one of the vulnerable groups. And then nutrition, of course, we need good food to build good immunity. So if one is malnourished, then disease is imminent. And then we have trauma and fatigue. Even trauma, if recuperating in trauma, sometimes you need high level of nutrition to recuperate. So if that person is not getting enough nutrition to even at that time, of course, the immunity is going to be low. So we are now going to look at some important terms. I'm just going to read through them because the slide is actually, can I say, be prepared by a chief. Okay, so I'm going to go through this now. So infection is the entry and development or multiplication of an infectious agent in the body of man or animal. An infection does not always cause illness. And I love this word. Does not always cause illness. So if you see it anywhere that infection always causes, it's no. Because like I said, that if someone has typhoid bacteria right now, it does not mean that as soon as the person is infected, that the person starts showing signs and symptoms. There's usually a time of incubation. The bacteria or the agent keep multiplying to the point, that threshold where disease will now start occurring. So the person now start having the symptoms coming up. So that point in time, when the agent enters into the host, susceptible host, let's don't forget susceptible host, is what we call infection. So infection is the entry and development or multiplication of an infectious agent in the body of man or animal, and it does not always cause illness. So the person might not be sick. The person will just be there. So, and the infection might be subclinical. That means you will not be able to see the infection, and it's common in the inner period polio. Of course, the paralytic polio, which is the one that we know, is just like 1%. Most of them do not even come down with that. Just do their thing, and they keep on spreading it. So if the what's it called, epidemiological tools are not powerful enough, they might not even be able to detect that there's polio in that community. If everybody is actually waiting for paralysis before polio is being gotten. So most times they go into the community, pick stool randomly from maybe where people are defecating and see randomly. So of course, the other one is the clinical manifestation. That is what usually happens in the end when a disease is actually pathogenic. So the person starts showing signs and symptoms, and then one can say disease is manifest. So contamination. Now, contamination is the presence of an infectious agent on a body surface or on a cloth, beddings, toys, surgical instruments, and so on and so forth. And these include water and food. So, and how is contamination different from infection? If you look at it critically, they said presence of an infectious agent on body surface. That's on the surface. But in infection, is inside that host. So water cannot be the host. Surgical instrument cannot be the host. Beddings cannot be the host. But in infection, the agent is already inside the host, that been introduced inside the host. And of course, like they said is developing and multiplying. So let me go back so that you can see that. See, is the entry and development or multiplication of an agent in the body of man. So it's inside the body, not on the surface. So that's the difference between them. So vector of infection, so an insect or any living carrier that transports an infectious agent from an infected individual or its waste to a susceptible host or its food or immediate surroundings. So what comes to my mind is housefly. And you can see the myriads, including cholera, that it causes. It's not that the cholera lives inside the, what's it called, the housefly. The housefly just perches on it, matches on the bacteria, comes to your fruit or food, perches on it again, drops some of them there, and leaves or even dies off. Then the humans continue the spread of the disease. So a reservoir now is any person, animal, arthropod, plant, soil, or substance in which an infectious agent lives and multiplies, and on which it depends on primarily for survival, and where it reproduces itself in such a manner that it can be transmitted to a susceptible host. It's actually a big, like a long definition, but it's just for us to understand what a reservoir is. So it's not just a person alone. No, it can be an animal, and we'll see that later. And it can be an arthropod. Arthropods are insects, and it can be plants. It can be on plants. Maybe, for instance, like I said, if human excreta is being used as manure, and they will just, or even animal dungs, they will mix it with water and spread it on leaves and on vegetables, and you now carry the vegetable home, you don't wash it properly and you eat it. Of course, you would have taken some of those eggs of those worms, and that's how the thing comes on. So that's what they're just trying to say in a sense. So, but above all, that infectious agent must be living and be multiplying in that reservoir, and it must depend on it primarily for survival. And of course, it must not be locked up in it, because if it's locked up in it, that means it's not be able to transmit to another person to make it infectious. So that's that. And it is the natural habitat in which the organism metabolizes and replicates, just like HIV is doing in man. HIV is really doing well. It's just come infect your white blood cells and just keep on multiplying, because they are in their home, like second home. So, and of course, because it's not locked up in that reservoir, it can be transmitted to another individual. So source of infection now is that person, animal, object, or substance from which an infectious agent passes or is disseminated to the host. So it may or may not be the same as reservoir. So that's what I'm trying to say later. You can use them interchangeably, but you have to be very cautious. Cautious in the sense that if sometimes the reservoir might be the source of infection, but their source of infection are not always reservoirs. So, for instance, now contaminated needles, waters, meat, and so on, now can be source of infection. We agree, and can also be a reservoir. That is, if that agent is actually depending solely on these things that have been mentioned here. But I don't think, even be an inanimate object, I don't think any agent can now depend solely and be multiplying and be living on contaminated needles. But of course, it can happen for milk, it can happen for food. But the food, how many minutes you have already eaten it? If it is something more, it can actually be both. But please, let's just get this right. It's not always the same. So if that agent can survive, can multiply, can reproduce, and can do anything it wants to do just to propagate itself on that, in that medium, then that is actually a reservoir and can actually form source of infection too. But if it's just source of infection, that means that agent is just using it at that moment. It cannot survive on it. Like I said earlier, HIV virus can actually stay on needles, can stay on barber's clippers, and so on. You understand? But as it's been said, if it is being exposed for a number of hours, it becomes deactivated. So that means it's inactive and then cannot be infectious at that time. Or maybe they now use this sterilization process again. So it can't survive. Okay. So hookworm is a disease, and the reservoir is actually man, but the source of infection contaminated soil. I'll tell you how. The man goes to, what's it called, to the bush and defecate. The eggs are inside that stool, and then it's just the egg just be there. So the reservoir is actually the man, but the source of infection will be the soil. So anybody that goes there barefooted, just start barefooted or eat food that are being used, that waste is being used with for something, then they get infected. Same to tetanus. Tetanus, the reservoir is soil and the source is still soil. So I think with this example, we understand what a reservoir strictly is and what source of infection strictly is. So typhoid reservoir is man, but source of infection is infected water, milk, or food. HIV, the reservoir, I think maybe this one has query. We don't know if man is majorly the reservoir, since they say it's coming from monkeys, from the beginning. Okay, so maybe we should just stick to the easy ones to grab. That's the hookworm, the tetanus, and then the typhoid. So there are different types of reservoirs. There's human reservoirs, there's animal reservoirs, and non-living reservoirs. So for the humans, we have the typhoid fever. For the animal reservoirs, you have rabies, we have yellow fever. I talked about yellow fever in monkeys. So once the hematophagous species of what's it called, the mosquito bites them, they come to the city, or I'm sorry, the tree fellas or the farmers, they just go to their terrain, to their territory, and get bitten, and then they bring it to town. So I don't think we need to talk about the epidemiology of yellow fever, but we just need to know that actually have animal reservoir is actually monkeys. They are in the bush. It's the mosquitoes that bite them that transfers it to man. Okay, so source of infection to man is actually mosquito, but the reservoir of infection is actually monkeys. So of course, avian flu has similar something, and then the non-living reservoir is soil, and what we know about soil strictly is that of tetanus too, and then of hookworm. For human reservoirs, this is very important for everybody to know, and I think it will be very nice if we can digest it properly, because it means a lot to most epidemiologists. So the cases, under cases, we have the primary case, the index case, and the secondary case. Now, I won't want to confuse you with the primary index case, because even at the postgraduate level here, we used to have hot debate on this, because the primary case can actually be the index case. The primary case is the true number one diseased person. But the index case is the first one that you catch. That is, the disease is already in the population. Somebody first had it, you missed it. That means you missed your primary case. But you now caught somebody red-handed having it. If the person is not the first person that had it, then the person is your index case. You are catching the person red-handed. But if the same person you've caught red-handed is the same person that first had it, then you are lucky to have gotten your primary case and your index case in one person. I hope I'm not confusing you. That's just the summary of this one. So anybody that comes after these two people are secondary cases, that means they're coming after. Please, I hope we get this, because it's really something they debate a lot most times. I hope you understand this, and I hope I'm still on.
Sorry, sir, can you repeat that again?
Okay. But we'll be following all through, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, primary case is the first case. When you say case, that means disease now. So it's the first case in the population, which most time we usually miss. I hope we understand that. We usually miss the primary case, the first person. In fact, the first person might have died, but we now transmit it to another person. That person is not the primary case. That person that got infected from the dead person is not the primary case, but is now going to be the index case because you are catching that person. However, some patients or some cases, you will catch them as the first person that had the disease. So catching the first person to have the disease is usually like a lucky chance, like a chance. So that person is also, as the person is your primary case, is also your index case. Because in the true picture, that is the first person that have that disease in the population. So it's the primary case. So if you are now able to catch the person yourself that, oh, you are having this disease, so you are having Ebola, then that person is this index case, because that's the person you are going to be working on. That's the person you are going to now start looking for the contacts. I hope you understand now. Whereas anybody that now gets sick or gets infected from that your index case is now the secondary case. Please, is that understood?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Okay, great. So now, cases according to spectrum of disease, we have clinical cases, we have subclinical cases, and latent infections. So now, the clinical cases are the one that is already here. You can see it. You can say it's mild, moderate, severe. You understand? You can grade it because you have seen it. The subclinical is the, like they used to say, how can I call it? We have something like they call atypical measles. They will be having symptoms like measles, but they will not show the full picture of measles. So you can't even place your hands on them. It's something that it will just go like a cold something. But they have the disease, but they won't show so much clinical symptoms or clinical symptoms that will make you to say this is this disease. But if you maybe do serology or you do anything, you know that they have disease. And they have latent infection. Latent infections, these ones are kind of how can I call it? Like disease that are can I say cold, and they are taking so long. How can I put it now? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So latent infections are can I say like they are symptomless actually. They won't show symptoms per se. And I can okay, let's use the word latency. Maybe we get to we understand. It's more common in diseases that takes a long time to manifest their thing. Let's use maybe human papilloma virus. Okay, any of those non-communicable diseases that are infectious in origin, that's even a good one. Now, someone who has HPV might have it at the age of 18 years when the person is now sexually exposed, but they will now start developing the disease maybe after 25 years. So that's maybe when they are 45, 50. So you can see it has a long latent, so that's latent infection. It will take a long time. That's what, in fact, that's just as the name is, latent infection, long time infection. They will just keep on carrying before they will now show. It take a long time before the disease, will occur. That's for the latent infection cases. So, and of course, then we have the other type, that's the carriers now. You have cases and carriers. Now, for the carriers, you have incubate, just as the name implies, incubatory. The person is incubating the, what's it called, the agent, and it's still, it's still in the person's body. And commonly, it's seen in, what's it called, this measles, chickenpox, because as the person is still incubating, if the person mingles with people and they, exchange maybe droplets, guaranteed, before the person starts showing those rashes that show that this person is having measles or chickenpox, the other person has already got infected. In fact, that's how I got infected. My friend got infected when I was doing a house job. I went to as an emergency to greet him. In fact, I never knew I was going to be doing this then. I was just an house officer. But I just went to see him in A&E. He was looking fine. Then we thought it was just malaria and typhoid, and I went to greet him. And of course, because he was fine, I had so much rapport with him. A few days, he just came down with the rash. And after a couple of days too, me too, I came down with the same symptom. My own was even worse than his anyways. So, but that's how it is. It was incubatory period that I went to see him, and I was already infected, but I never knew. So most times, in fact, it is said that once the rash is going, they are no longer infected because the virus has already, subsided, and the loads then it's already dissipating, and then it can be. So then the convalescence is during the time they are recovering that these ones are shedding inside. And I think it's more common for the typhoid bacteria. That was what was happening towards the late, what is this woman's Mary, the typhoid Mary. If you have heard of her story, okay, she just kept on, shedding the, what's it called, till she just shedding continuously during that time. And I think she ran away from the house. If we take our time to read the story, we understand this convalescent and early carriers. But early carriers are people who are well, but they have the, what's it called, in their body, the agents in their body, and they are still spreading. Or they are, sorry, not that they are still spreading, but they can spread it. So that means if you have anything to do with them, you can actually have the disease. Those are the early carriers. And then, because the carriers can be temporary or chronic. Typhoid Mary fall under the chronic one because she's just doing that. And then the portal of exit rather, of the carriers, for some of them are urinary, intestinal, respiratory, and so on. And when anyone wants to come to mind again, this typhoid, the typhoid is actually urinary. So she just kept on spreading it, during that period. Because when she urinates, maybe she's not washing her hands. Before you know it, it's already in people's food, and that's how she kept spreading it. So I think it would be nice for us to just read about typhoid Mary. Let's just Google it and read. I think we have a clearer picture about this carrier state. So cases, like I said, is defined as a person in a population study group identified as having the particular disease or health disorder or condition under investigation. Those are the cases. Now, so whereas carriers is an infected person animal that harbors specific infectious agent in the absence of discernible or visible clinical diseases and serves as a potential source of infection to others. So the three elements, so these three elements are key for anyone to be called a carrier. So for one to say, you are a carrier, then the person must fulfill these three elements. There must be the presence in the body of the disease agent. So that individual must have that, like typhoid Mary had typhoid inside her body, have typhoid bacteria in her body, and the absence of recognizable symptoms and signs. Yes, she was selling food now. She was just living fine, traveling from one place to the other. All the places she went to, she was just getting typhoid. She's living fine. Somebody could trace it, but the first place they were able to know that is this lady. Anytime this lady travels to a town, there's usually a outbreak of this. So now, and then the shedding of disease agent in discharge or excretions, she was just shedding urine. It might be in her urine because it can be through that medium and it can be through physics. So she was just shedding, and these are the key things that make someone a carrier. But above all, those symptoms, you must not see any, because once you see any symptom, then it's no longer, you cannot call that person actually a carrier like that, because for you to be a carrier, you must have the disease agent, and there must not be symptoms or signs to show that you have the disease. So it occurs either due to inadequate treatment or immune response, and the disease agent is not completely eliminated, leading to carrier state. So a case is infected and clinically ill. A carrier is infected but not clinically ill. A carrier may be a healthy carrier, which is typhoid. That's, in fact, it's classic. It's classic. There's no two ways about it. The classic example for a healthy carrier is typhoid. Typhoid Mary was, I've forgotten her surname. Okay, but she was traveling from town to town. In fact, later they lost track of her. She was just traveling around because she knows that they've caught her up in this place. She will run to another city. She will start selling food. They want to catch her. She will run. So later they lost track of her. And she's healthy. She was healthy. So nobody could pick on her anytime she enters their city. So incubating carriers include measles, HIV, and so on. And convalescent carriers include cholera. And I think for cholera, the individual can actually transmit up to like 6 months after you have finished treating them. So, and that makes the control of cholera very difficult in some places where you have so many carriers in this thing. They will still be feeling fine, they'll be doing fine, but they will still be shedding the bacteria, for up to like 6 months after treatment. So, and HIV also falls in this category. So, why are carriers important? They can outnumber the sick patients, which is true. So, you should note this, that carriers are unique. In fact, if catching a carrier is like winning a jackpot, because that's the source of your infection. The person just is spreading the infection and you don't know. So they are often not aware of the infection, not likely to take preventive measures like Typhoid Mary. I think I'm already over-chewing this Typhoid Mary. She's classic. Please just take your time, read it, and try to understand, and maybe to give you better understanding of what you're discussing here. And then you have chronic carriers can serve as a source of infection for a long time, which is true, especially in cholera. So healthy person or a carrier, this picture is just a food for thought. How do you know that this person is healthy or the person is a carrier? So a carrier is, in fact, catching a carrier is like a huge success, because you can't see any symptoms. So you can't say this person is sick or this person is healed, but they keep on spreading disease in the population. So that's why these beautiful faces are showing here. Okay, you can't be sure if this man have HIV because I'm seeing red ribbon here. You can't be sure if this woman is also having HIV or having typhoid. Okay, but they are looking so nice here. Okay, so there's also animal reservoir, and diseases called that is caused by these animals is called zoonosis. So this is caused by rather transmitted to man by animals. It's called zoonosis, and occurs when man uses animals for food, as seen in worm, that's in teniasis. And then we have vector transmitting from man to animal, like yellow fever. We talk about that. We know about rabies, which is transmitted by dog to man through bites. And then we have contaminated animals contaminate human environment, like bubonic plague and rats, which is seen in rat. So in the bubonic plague, the rats, the fleas actually stay on the rats, and of course they can't travel for long. That's for the flea. They can't fly for so long. So what they do is they just stay on the body of the rat, and the rats keep doing their job for them by transporting them. So okay, these are just occurrence is in red. If you define it, if you define the epidemic and you do not put in excess of expected occurrence, you are just defining something even have cholera 2 every year, and they be getting 2 to 4 for the past 10 years. But in 2022, they now saw that 4 changed to 6, 10, 12, 25, 50. That, in fact, is a trend. Once you see that trend, you know that any year, all the years, like 10 years, you've not seen anything more than 4. Once you start seeing anything more than 4, that is an epidemic, and you have to start preparing for emergency preparedness for looking up the epidemic. So it's the unusual occurrence in a community of a disease or specific health-related behavior or other health-related events clearly in excess. So you must have actually be doing underground surveillance to know when the thing is clearly in excess, because some of these things can be coming from villages around and might just be rumor. And because you are not be keeping data, you will not be able to know if it is true or not. So upon endemic states. Two. So what they mean by endemic is the normal, like what has been normal. Like malaria is endemic in this country. So if anything now happens, that malaria now shoots beyond what we have been having, you can now say you're having epidemic of malaria, but you know Nigeria is actually malaria. So we may not be able to talk about malaria, but it's just saying that a disease in the community is, I hope we know that cholera exists in the community. It's not just common at a particular season, but there's usually a surge at a particular season. If off season, it is 2 in that community, that is what they call endemic. It has always been 2. But if something happens, it now changes to 15, then you can now say it's endemic. So a disease that has been endemic can actually become an epidemic. That's what it's trying to say. Disease. So even if people are shouting, hey, our children are dying, what's happening? And you go and check your record. And say, okay, what has been happening? They say, okay, 2 people died from drinking this water, and 2 people have been dying of drinking that water since 2016 that you have been keeping record. That means there's not, it's just that maybe those people are just noticing that the people are dying of it at that time. So there's no need for you to start summoning agencies or anybody to come to your aid because of the epidemic. If you check your record, so can, however, talk about endemic, and Nigeria is one of them. So pandemic, an epidemic usually affecting a large proportion of population occurring over a wide geographic area, such as section of a nation, the entire nation, or continent or world, is called pandemic. Now, I was fortunate to attend one of the updates last few years, and this definition, if they don't bring anything geographic like beyond a nation for you, then fine, you can pick it. But when they say pandemic, it's not within a country. It must have affected more geographical zone of the world. So if it's happened in a country, they still term it as epidemic. If it is now between Ghana, Nigeria, Sierra Leone, and stuff, that's when they, because they are not connected. Okay, so that's what this sporadic means. It's not linked. Or infrequently, the starting point of infection from the whole world. So now, the last argument we actually had during the update course was, is there truly a disease that can actually be eradicated? Because if it is truly eradicated, that means that agents, including labs. But if they should allow all disease to be eradicated, that they kill all infectious agents, it means that if something happens by chance, those agents comes back, we won't have anything to work on. So it still does it to really say maybe the disease is fully eradicated when they still have them in the lab. But the true meaning of eradication is that there is termination of all transmission of infection by extermination of the infectious agent through surveillance and containment. And you know, it has to be all throughout the world. So if you still have it in some lab, you know, like they said, the COVID stuff was actually from a lab of whatever they are doing there. So if they still have it in the lab, if something happens, you can still have the disease coming up again. Okay, that's just it's subject for, you know, discussion. So now the term elimination, however, is sometimes used to describe eradication of a disease from a large geographic region, and diseases which are amenable to elimination in the meantime actually polio, measles, diphtheria. What it's just trying to say is that when it's within a locality, it's not all over the world. Maybe, you know, Ghana might be able to do theirs. Nigeria has not been able to do theirs. Sierra Leone is still trying to battle with their own. So if, like now, Nigeria has eliminated polio, and we can remember there was a time that they said, oh, the countries that are having polio are pain. Pakistan, I think pain, Afghanistan, India, and Nigeria. Later, India succeeded, so it became pan. Pakistan, Afghanistan, Nigeria. Now, Nigeria has eliminated theirs. It's now remaining PA, which is Pakistan and Afghanistan. And of course, we know why these places are not being are not doing that appropriately, because of the what's it called? The war and the insecurities and everything happening there. So that's just by this. So once you do it within that geographic area and it's not all over the world, then that's elimination. But eradication is total termination of that infectious disease around, as in the whole world. That is eradication. So the ultimate goal of public health is the prevention and control of disease, the preservation of good health, and the promotion of a good quality of life. So I'm going to stop here. I think this is where I'm supposed to stop. Somebody else will be taking the prevention definition concept. Thank you for listening. I hope we all understood. If you have questions, you can have questions now.
No questions, sir. Thank you very much for the class. Thank you for your time.
Chief, thank you very much. But please, I was having serious network issue. For the purpose of, because we are recording this stuff, could you just maybe go back to endemic and hyper-endemic, holo-endemic, and pandemic? Just those 3 slides, I just discuss it again, please.
Yes, okay, I'm going to start from epidemic.
No, you know, I think I got this one. It's from endemic. I didn't get it exactly.
Okay. Yeah. Now, good. Now, for the endemic, we said it refers to the constant presence of a disease or infectious agent within a geographical area or population group. However, I now said that the key sorry, what came through? I'm sorry. Can you hear me, please?
Yes, we can hear
Hello,
you.
Can you?
We can hear you.
I had a call.
Yeah.
In red is the usual or expected frequency of disease. So I now said that if, for instance, the usual number that the epidemiology department of a state or a local government have been recording is 2 to 4 every year for the past 15 years that they've been taking a record or doing surveillance. If something happens that the thing now increases to 15, you will know that that is not the usual occurrence. So you will know that is epidemic. Then start preparing on how to, to mop up what is happening or to find out why you're having excess. So now that means it is not the usual and it is not the expected frequency. So definitely that is epidemic. So, but if every year you are getting 2 to 4, 2 to 4, 2 to 4, 2 to 4, of course, that is the endemic. That means in that village or in that geographical area, that is what is usual and expected of, of that population in terms of disease entity. Okay. So now, but for the hyperendemic, we now said that the disease is constantly present in high incidence or prevalence rates and affects all age groups. So what we are now saying that in this hyper-endemic state now, that means the disease, even though kind of it might seem like is endemic, that is usual for that community, that disease, but is in high number. Let me give an example. Nigeria is endemic for malaria, we know. But you go to some communities, we already know Nigeria has malaria and all of us are used to it. That's why we are not even worried about it. But you now notice that in some communities or somewhere, we are having maybe like 50 per day. Let's assume that in other places, we already said Nigeria is endemic and is 10 to 12. So we know. But in some places, it will just remain at that 12, 13. It doesn't come down to 2. It doesn't come down. So that means in that place, they have a high endemicity. So that's why we call it hyper-endemic state. So is the term is expressing that disease is constantly present at high incidence or prevalence rate if the disease does not cure and affects all age groups equally. Where the holoendemic one expresses a high level of infection beginning at the early stage of life, maybe in children, and stays with them for a long time till they reach adulthood. And then at that adulthood, they now have a kind of balance. That's what they call equilibrium, so that the population, the adult population now that have now grown, they will show evidence of disease, but it will be less common than do the children. Why? Because maybe they've built immunity to it. Children, the infection of malaria in adults and children is the same because it's the same house they are living. A mosquito is biting all of them. But over the years, the adults have developed mechanism of coping with the malaria disease. So children under 5 die more, they have more effect, more of malaria. So if you want to do rollback malaria, what comes to your mind is pregnant women and children. Really, not adults. In fact, the campaign that is happening now is only children that are giving anti-malaria. They're not giving adults. But those adults were actually coming from childhood. They were once in that category, but they've overgrown that level. So that's why this holoendemic term, holoendemic, that's what it's just trying to say, that it exerts a high level of infection which begins in early childhood and affects everybody in the population, that's during childhood, but leading to a state of equilibrium such that the adult population shows evidence of disease much less common than do the children. So children, of course, we know what malaria does to them. Well, cerebral malaria is common in them, but some of them still survive and turn to adults in future. So that's what this is just talking about. Then the pandemic, we've talked about COVID-19. It has affected many regions of the world. It is not only China, it's not only US, it's not only Nigeria, it's not only Japan. It has affected, in fact, almost all the countries of the world. So that's why it's called pandemic. We now said that even if it affects the whole country, Nigeria, or the whole country, China, it can never be called pandemic. And that was why during the COVID issue, the WHO never declared that disease pandemic, because they were trying to watch to see if it's going to be seen in another part of the world. Of course, the thing has already spread further than they thought before they could declare, but of course, that's what just happened. Before you declare something pandemic, you must be sure it has moved beyond boundaries of one country. So maybe 2 or 3 geographical regions of the world. Okay, but one of my friends was saying at least six geographical thing, but some will say that once it moves out of one country to another, then that's a pandemic. Okay, so that's for pandemic. And then we have exotic. Why they call it exotic, that means something special, something strange. That's the meaning of exotic. Let's use those terms to qualify it. Okay, so now if a country is known or a region is known of not having a particular disease, we know that UK does not have malaria. If you find malaria in UK, it means somebody came in with it. You can be like 101% sure that somebody brought it in, and that's why they call it exotic. So exotic diseases are those which are important to a country in which they do not otherwise occur, as for example, malaria in the UK. So, and we talk of sporadic, it occurs once in a while. We know quite well that tetanus is not everyday thing. In fact, for the past how many years, I've not seen tetanus case again. But there was a time that, you just see them, just occur, maybe in a whole year, maybe you see 3 or 4. So they are not linked. You can't really link them together, but the data is just there that you know that, okay, tetanus exists in this community, but you cannot link them. You cannot say maybe this one infected this or this one infected that. No, they just occur on their own. Okay, so that's just what the sporadic is all about. So, and their timing, it's haphazard. You can't link them with a particular time. Tetanus can occur any time of the year, anytime. Because of course we said the soil is the reservoir now. So if anybody comes in contact with the soil, gets infected, and that's how the thing works for sporadic infections. So, but however, what Na said is that sporadic disease could be a starting point of an epidemic when conditions are favorable for a spread. So an infection that occurs once in a while can also become an epidemic, can also become a public health issue if the conditions are favorable for that agent to become so. That's what this is all talking about. Let's assume it's a environmental factor now that is now making that agent to become more virulent, to be more infectious. Then of course they can have more people infected, and then we have a surge in the incidence. So I hope I'm done now.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, sir. We appreciate your lecture. Once more, we'll say thank you and a God kind effort. Thank you very much.